All right, so the retirement problem. Our goal is to figure out how many years it's going to take us to save $1 million for retirement, right? And we said we need to use a while loop. Why? Why do we need to use a while loop instead of a for loop? Yes, sir?
I think because you will set like a time or something it will end on it, calculating like if we set maybe 1 million, so it will stop when you calculate the 1 million.
Right, so we have this condition, right? We need to get to $1 million. We don't know how many times we're going to have to repeat this process of adding money into our retirement account to get to $1 million. We can't predict that ahead of time. Things are changing. We're adding money in, the interest rate, it's all complicated. We can't pre-calculate how many years it's going to take us to get to $1 million. So we can't use a for loop because with a for loop we have to know I want to repeat something 10 times or I want to repeat something 1,000,000 times, right? We don't know that for the retirement problem, so we have to use a while loop. The while loop, we don't care how many times it repeats. We don't need to know that ahead of time. We just need to know when we want to stop. We want to stop adding money to our retirement account when we've reached $1 million. So that's when we use while loops. When we don't know how many times we want to repeat, but we know we have to satisfy some sort of condition before we stop. So we're going to use the while loop to do that. And let's see. So let's I think we've planned out our tasks. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to write a script, right? That's what we decided we were going to do. So we're going to open up a script in MATLAB. And when we write scripts, what's the thing we should put at the top of a script all the time?
The name.
We could put the name, right? So we could say this is the retirement problem. And then what else could we list here? We could list our inputs. And in this case, we want to get the initial balance as an input. And we could list our outputs. We'd say, what do we want? We want to know the number of years and potentially our final balance. So we might not hit exactly $1 million. We might be a little bit over, but that's okay. What's next when we're writing a script?
Clarifying.
The housekeeping, right? We put our housekeeping task. We always should have housekeeping tasks in a script. Why do we put housekeeping tasks in a script and not a function?
To delete all the values that we have, they might complicate with the values that we are setting.
I don't know if I understand what you're saying. We've got the variables in the workspace, right? And if we don't clear the variables in the workspace, then the script could use those and it could be confused, right? So we want to clear our workspace. So that's what the clear command does, and we want to do the CLC. Turn off these lights. So we have those two commands. Now what do we want to do in our script? Yep, David?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
When we put clear CLC
Mhm.
for this past homework, when we put CLC, because in the way we're supposed to display your answers, like when you do not want CLC in there, because every time you run the script, so like you said, like check your answers with all the intervals, and put CLC, then it's just going to keep getting rid of all that stuff. So
CLC just erases the kind of the current things that are in the command window.
Yeah.
It doesn't get rid of the things that are going in your diary file. Does that kind of answer your question? No? So whenever you run a script, I usually like putting the CLC there. It's not really required. It just kind of helps me get rid of stuff that may have been wrong from the last time that I ran the script, and then I know that the current things that are printing out to the screen are the things from this current run of the script.
Yeah, I mean, I usually did that, but I was saying, like, when you, on the homework where it said, like, display, like,
Yeah.
C in each value, but if you keep running it, like, you want to diary file everything that was in there, so it'll keep deleting, or not deleting it, but clearing out the command window, wouldn't it?
It clears out the command window, but the stuff still goes to the diary file.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So CLC doesn't affect your diary file. It just affects what you see right now in your command window. Yes, sir?
In another class,
Mhm.
we'd always do clear, close all CLC. Why don't we do close all with?
Because we have it, so close all closes like figures or plot windows. So once we learn about plotting,
Okay.
we will start sticking the close all in there. Right now, there's no point to putting it in there because we don't have any plot windows or anything else. Any other questions? All right, so now what do we need to do? We did our housekeeping. What's the next thing that we do in a script? Declare our variables, right? What variables do we have in this problem? The balance. So we have an initial balance, right? And we said we wanted to get that as an input from the user, right? So we could say our balance is equal to what? Input. So in a script, we use the input command or the input function to get input. And what do I put inside the parentheses here?
You can enter the message.
Right, whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
And I have to put it in single quotes. So I could say enter the initial balance. Or whatever it is that I want to write there. What other variables do I have in this problem? I have my interest rate, and I have my yearly investment, right? So we need to declare those variables. So we'll say, I don't know, let's call it rate is what? I said the rate is 8%. Can I type 8% in MATLAB? 0.08, right? I have to write it in the notation that MATLAB understands. So 0.08 is our 8%. And then I have my yearly investment. I'm just going to call that yearly. And we said our yearly investment was $5,000, right? So now I've done my variables. Now I got to figure out what to do for kind of our task B, which is to increase the balance in our retirement account, including the yearly investment and our interest rate on our previous balance until we get to $1 million. So that's the thing I've got to do now. What did we say we needed to do for that? What kind of MATLAB code do we need to write for that? And we did our MATLAB translation. What did we do? A while loop, right? So let's think about what our while loop is going to look like. We have while, and then something goes over here. What do we call that thing over there?
Expression.
The expression. So we got to think about what kind of expression we're going to need for this problem. So what do we want to do? We want to repeat adding money into our retirement account until we get to $1 million, right? So what kind of expression should I write here then?
Balance is less than $1 million.
Balance is less than $1 million. So we have balance. So while the balance is less than $1 million, and I can do, in scientific notation, 1e to the 6th. And that code repeats inside the while loop in what condition? Is this expression true or false when we're repeating? True. So the code inside of the while loop is going to repeat while this expression is true. So while the balance is less than $1 million, we want to keep adding money into our retirement account. When we've gotten above $1 million, or equal to or above $1 million, we're going to stop and we're going to say we've collected enough money. We think we can live on that for the rest of our time. So now we got to figure out, then we'll fill in the blank there, but let's do our first line. So let's say while balance is less than $1 million, so 1e to the 6th. We're going to do something in here. Now we're going to figure out what we're going to do inside of our while loop. So what do we want to do inside of our while loop? We're going to add money, right? How are we going to add money? We've got to have an equation to add money. So we got to figure out what kind of equation we need. We said we were going to have two different things in our adding to our retirement account. We're going to put our yearly investment in it every year. We're going to put our $5,000 in it. And we're also going to count for the interest on the previous balance that we had, right? So what kind of equation is that going to look like?
Balance is equal to parentheses balance times rate and parentheses plus yearly. Or 1 plus rate would probably be easier.
Yep. Where's my eraser?
Why did you write 1?
So why do we write 1? So if I were to just have rate times balance, that's just going to give me 8% of my balance. It's not going to be added on top of the previous balance that I had in there. So we have, so initially the first year we got $5,000 in there. We want our $5,000 plus the interest, the 8% of $5,000 added together,
Okay.
plus our new yearly investment that we have, right? Is it okay that I have balance on this side of the equation and balance on that side of the equation?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yes, no, we're confused.
It's gonna change every time.
It's going to change every time. So remember when we type into MATLAB, we type in A is equal to 2, and then in the next line we can type A is equal to 4. What does MATLAB do? MATLAB forgets that it was 2 before and it makes it 4 now, right? So MATLAB can change those values on the fly as they want. So what is this telling MATLAB? This is telling MATLAB my new value of balance, whatever it is on the left-hand side, is equal to the previous value of balance and all this other stuff over here. So it's going to update, and before this line, balance is going to be one thing. After this line, balance is going to be something more. So MATLAB's going to keep updating that for us. Do we need to have anything else inside of our while loop? Hunter? We need a counter, because we said we wanted to count how many years it was going to take us to get to retirement, right? So what is that going to look like? Yes?
Year equals year plus 1.
Year is equal to year plus 1.
You need to initialize year.
And so what that's going to do is basically the same thing. So we set year somewhere up here at the top. Before we start our while loop, we set year equals to 0. We say we start at the 0 year. Then MATLAB comes in here, calculates a balance. It says the new value of year is equal to 0 plus 1. So now we're on the first year. Then it's going to come back again. It's going to say 1 plus 1 is 2. It's going to go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's going to count how many years it's going to take us to retire. All right? Do we need anything else inside of our while loop? I think we're good. What do we do to tell MATLAB we're done? The end, right? So let's add that into our code. So first we have balance is equal to balance times 1 plus our rate plus our yearly investment. And then we have our year counter and our end. We also have to remember somewhere above our while loop to initialize years or year to 0. What would happen if we didn't have that there? What if we forgot to initialize that variable? Is MATLAB going to be okay? No, right? Because we're going to try to use it. When we get to this line, MATLAB's going to say, I want a new value of year that's equal to the old value of year plus 1. If there's no old value of year, we're going to get an error. MATLAB's going to say that variable hasn't been defined before we're trying to use it. So we're going to get some sort of error like that. All right? What else should we do in this script? Display. So we need some display statements. We could say the final balance is and the number of years is So now that we've written our script, what should we check before we run? The green light. So we have a green light. We're good. What else should we do? Save it. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm just going to call mine retirement. And then I'm going to add a third thing in that we have to check. So we need to check our green light, we need to check that we've saved our program, and because we've written a while loop, we have to make sure that we've abided by the 2 rules for the while loop. And why do we need to make sure that we've abided by the 2 rules for the while loop? Because those are the rules. We got to make sure that it works, or our code for a while loop is not going to work. So what was rule number 1 about a while loop? Right, so our expression needs to be true at least the first time. And why is that? We can get in, right? So we got to have a way to get into the while loop. So we have to look at our code. We have to figure out, is our expression going to be true at least one time? So our expression is, while the balance is less than $1 million. So as long as we enter in something in the input that's less than $1 million, that expression is going to be true. So we're good there. What's the second rule for the while loop? Yeah, Joe?
It has to become false.
It has to become false, and what does that help us do?
Exit the loop.
Get out of the loop so we don't get stuck in one of those infinite loops like Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory, right? We don't want to get stuck and be turning around forever. We got to get out. So is that true in this case? Is balance going to be eventually greater than $1 million? We're shaking our heads yes. How do we know that? The equation, right? We look at our equation and we say balance is equal to the old balance plus something else. So I can look at that equation and I know that balance is going to be getting bigger every time, right? So eventually it's going to get to be above $1 million. Yes, sir?
So if you don't do that, will like crash your MATLAB then?
I will show you in a minute what happens. It is deceptively unexciting. So it is really hard to tell that you have gotten stuck in an infinite while loop. So we'll get there. All right, so now we've checked those. So we've checked all those things. We got our green light, we've saved, and now we've checked our rules for the while loop, so we're probably ready to run. So let's see what happens when we run. So we can hit our magic green run button, and we enter in our initial balance, and we said our initial balance was also $5,000, right? Hopefully everybody got the same answers. Does that make sense? So we didn't get right at $1 million. Why did we not get right at $1 million? We got 1.01 times 10 to the 6th.
Because you'd get $1 million in the middle of that year.
Right. So somewhere in the middle of year 35, before we got to 36, we got to $1 million, but we didn't ask MATLAB to stop in the middle of a year. We asked MATLAB to stop at the end of the year. So we got a little bit more than $1 million, but that's okay. That's all we asked MATLAB to do. All right? Questions? Does anybody have any trouble with that one? Good? Okay. So going back to Sawyer's question. So what happens if we get stuck in an infinite while loop? So let's see if we can break our code. So if I change my yearly investment to negative, so if I subtract off my yearly investment accidentally, I think that'll do it. So let's see if we run. We enter in our $5,000, and then I press enter, and nothing seems to be happening, right? nothing printed out to the screen. I didn't get my retirement money. I didn't get my years. And you might be saying, gee, what's MATLAB doing? And you can even, a lot of times what will happen is that people will just continuously hit the run button because they think that they haven't run anything. And that's also a disaster because MATLAB will just keep that information in the background and it will just continue trying to run your program for as many clicks as you hit on the screen. So when you see something like this and you haven't got any outputs that you think should be coming to the screen, you're probably stuck in an infinite while loop. How do you know that? MATLAB puts over here in the corner, in your bottom left corner, it says it's busy. That's your only indication that you're stuck in an infinite while loop, is that it's busy down there. So it's thinking about something. What it's thinking about, we don't really care, but it's thinking about doing something, and it's not doing really anything productive. It's just stuck. So how do we get out of this? There's a couple options. One, you can just close MATLAB altogether, and it will stop running. Or if you don't want to do that, you can go into your command window, click in there, and hit Control-C or something, whatever Mac people do, Apple something C. And then you'll get this nice message that says, operation terminated by the user. Yes, I know I did that because I stopped it. I told MATLAB to stop. Thank you for telling me that. And then you have to go in and figure out what's wrong with your while loop. So MATLAB's not going to give you an error. It's not going to tell you your infinite while loop. And it's not going to really tell you how to fix an infinite while loop either. So you have to figure that out yourself. Thus, the 2 rules for the while loop. If you follow the rules, hopefully you won't get stuck in an infinite while loop and you won't have to figure out what's happening on your homework or quiz or whatever. All right? Any questions about that? Okay, so now you guys start working on your in-class exercise problems. So you've got 2 problems. One is about an ice cube adding to a beverage, and the other one is just about some numbers. Yes, sir? No.